There are certain things that complement each other perfectly. Salt and pepper, peanut butter and jelly, peanut butter and chocolate, Blink-182 and Seafoam Green, and Nintendo's handhelds and home consoles. They've always paired well together. From the original Game Boy with the NES and Super Nintendo, to the Game Boy Advance and GameCube, all the way up to the Switch, which is both their handheld and home console. They've worked together to unfold gaming adventures, even bringing new additions to expand those journeys. The 3DS and Wii U worked so well together in many ways to realize gaming visions. From sequels to general access to games that were hard to come by, these two machines were partners in bringing incredible games to those who looked to play. And in one extraordinary moment, they unlocked an entire game series, one of the greatest to ever exist, The Legend of Zelda. The Legend of Zelda is one of Nintendo's greatest properties. It's part of the foundation that allowed them to become what they are today. Their games have been touted as some of the best in existence, and though some of them probably aren't to everyone's taste, a decent amount of people would agree that they are very good. Today, you can easily find and play many Zelda games on the Switch, which is great, but you're not going to find all of them there. The Zelda games span across all of Nintendo's home consoles and handhelds dating back to the NES and Game Boy. And luckily, most of the home console games have been represented very well over the years, starting with the GameCube and Game Boy Advance. With these two consoles, you could play all the Zelda releases up to that time. The Legend of Zelda Collector's Edition was released for the GameCube as a promotional disc. It has both the NES games and both N64 games. The Wind Waker and Twilight Princess were also released for the GameCube. The Game Boy Advance filled in the gaps with A Link to the Past, the Minish Cap, and a way to play those NES games on the go with the classic NES series. It's also backwards compatible with Game Boy and Game Boy Color games. This would be the last time you would be able to play these Game Boy games on current consoles, because Nintendo decided to move past the Game Boy line of handhelds and move forward with the DS. And even though the original DS and DS Lite have Game Boy Advance cartridge slots, they aren't backwards compatible with Game Boy or Game Boy Color games, though it was nice being able to play Game Boy Advance games on the DS. During this time, the Wii made it extremely easy and affordable to get all those past Zelda games. They were downloadable from the Virtual Console. All the games from the NES, Super Nintendo, and N64 were available, and most Wii consoles were backwards compatible with GameCube games, giving you the ability to play every home console release on the Wii. But this left a gap in time where the Game Boy titles were not easily obtainable, but that all changed with the release of the 3DS. Nintendo decided to put a Virtual Console on the handheld system. It not only made home console games available, but the handheld games were also represented. And it's here at this time that the Zelda series started to blossom. The NES games were a lock to be released on the 3DS. They seemed to show up everywhere, and I think we've all taken that for granted. They are great games, and it's good to see that they were given a life on the 3DS. A Link to the Past was also made available on the new 3DS consoles. But what really made the 3DS Virtual Console shine were the releases of the Game Boy games. One of the most notable games to become available was Link's Awakening, and not the original black and white version, but the Color DX edition. For $5, you got one of the best top-down Zelda games, and it looked and played great. Link's Awakening was further complemented by the releases of Oracle of Ages and Oracle of Seasons, two fantastic Zelda games developed by Capcom for the Game Boy Color. Very few people talk about these games. They are high-quality Zelda titles. One major feature these games have on the 3DS is the ability to link them together for gameplay not available when you are playing them on their own, which was a feature on the Game Boy Color when you linked both cartridges. If you happened to be part of the Ambassador program, you were given 10 Game Boy Advance games. One of them was The Legend of Zelda, The Minish Cap, which was also developed by Capcom. This game is one of the best looking 2D Zelda games. It also has one of the most innovative mechanics, allowing you to shrink down and access places only something that size could. But the Virtual Console wasn't the only way we were able to play legacy Zelda games on the 3DS. Nintendo released a full 3D remake of Ocarina of Time. What's important about this remake is that Nintendo kept the game true to the original. The graphics were updated, as were a few controls like the gyro aiming. It's considered the definitive way to play Ocarina of Time. But the big feature this game offers is the ability to be played in actual 3D. The depth does make for a unique experience. Seeing those iconic elements in actual 3D space is amazing. But if you don't like the 3D, it's easy to turn off. The game is still very good without it. Ocarina of Time wasn't the only Zelda game to be given a remake. Majora's Mask was also remade for the 3DS. Graphically, this game looks amazing, but overall, it wasn't received as well as Ocarina of Time. Controls and game mechanics were altered, changing the way it felt, which didn't stay true to the original. and given that this is one of the most beloved Zelda games, was a miss on Nintendo's part. Which is unfortunate, because Ocarina of Time was treated with such care to make sure that it didn't deviate from the original game. One of the best features of the 3DS is that it's backwards compatible with the DS games, and the DS happened to get 2 Zelda games, Phantom Hourglass and Spirit Tracks. Let's say they have a unique control style, making use of the stylus. Both are playable on the 3DS. In 2013, Nintendo revisited the Hyrule from A Link to the Past with somewhat of a sequel called A Link Between Worlds. This game went back to the top-down style of past Zelda games. The 3D offered by the 3DS really makes this game a joy to play. Looking down and seeing all those rooms with their walls protruding from the screen really sells that this world is real. This is one Zelda game that's worth a playthrough. The Wii U is Nintendo's most misunderstood console. So many people have judged it by the things they've heard or just by looking at it. It's unfortunate because the Wii U not only had potential but lived up to most of it. It has a proper virtual console that allows you to buy and download individual games and keep them for as long as the console works. Most console libraries on the service were games that we had already seen on the Wii, but this time they look good on modern TVs because of the HDMI output, though NES games look dark and were blurry. Included in these games were Zelda games. The original Legend of Zelda, Zelda 2, A Link to the Past, Ocarina of Time, and Majora's Mask were all there. Though the Nintendo 64 games are not the remakes from the 3DS. These are the original Nintendo 64 ROMs. The Wii U helped fill in the gaps where the Ambassador program on the 3DS only allowed a few select to play some games. The Virtual Console didn't offer just games from the home consoles, but also their portable systems. The Game Boy Advance made its Virtual Console debut on the Wii U, and with it, the Minish Cap was available. This was great because this game has continued to rise in price for the physical cartridge. DS games were also offered over the service. Both Phantom Hourglass and Spirit Tracks were there, and thanks to the gamepad with its touchscreen, these games played really well on the TV. All the games mentioned up until now could also be played on the 3DS, and where it left off, the Wii U continued on. Going back a gaming generation, Skyward Sword was compatible on the Wii U. You could play the Wii disc or download it from the eShop for $20. You could do this with many Wii games, but the most significant Zelda games to come out on the Wii U were the GameCube remakes. Nintendo developers were testing out the capabilities of the Wii U when they were taken back by how great the Wind Waker looked in HD. Aonuma presented the idea of an HD release of the game on the Wii U to Miyamoto, and he greenlit the project. This game is fantastic and is arguably the best version of it. Aside from the visual upgrade, the most notable change is the Swift Sail, which makes traversing the Great Sea faster and more enjoyable. There are also a few other changes like the Tingle Tuner now being the Tingle Bottle and having the items and item map on the gamepad. Twilight Princess was also given an HD edition, and like the Wind Waker HD, this is also arguably the best way to play the game. Instead of just looking at the Wii version for inspiration, Nintendo used both the Wii and GameCube versions to create the HD game for the Wii U. It mainly draws from Twilight Princess from the GameCube. It no longer has motion controls, making use of the buttons on the gamepad, and isn't mirrored like the Wii port. Link is back to being a lefty. Though, Hero Mode is mirrored like the Wii game, making Link right-handed. It's in widescreen, which is how you could play it on the Wii. Comparing Twilight Princess HD to the Wind Waker HD makes it look less impressive. The art direction is a little stiff, and the color doesn't punch you in the face like it does in the Wind Waker. I'm sure Nintendo wanted this game to look dreary and maybe a little miserable, but some color would have been nice. It's still a great game that's definitely worth playing. Contrary to how things shook out at the launch of the Switch, Breath of the Wild was developed specifically for the Wii U. It's a great game, and plays great on both the Wii U and the Switch. It's hard not to think of it as just a Switch game. It's so attached to the Switch's success. It was supposed to be the Zelda game for the Wii U, but with the Wii U failing to win over the masses, Nintendo course corrected and delayed its release so it would coincide with the Switch's launch. That proved to be a really good move, because it was a huge draw to get a Switch to play Breath of the Wild. Luckily, Nintendo didn't abandon the Wii U, and it came out the same day as the Switch version. Because Nintendo consoles were so scarce at the time, people were searching out Wii U so they could play Breath of the Wild. When people couldn't find a Switch, the Wii U inventory in retail stores quickly went to zero. The 3DS and Wii U complemented each other very well during their lifetimes. They brought about many adventures that have resonated with players everywhere, whether that was through legacy titles or originals that were played on consoles or ported to the Switch. They worked so well together in many ways to realize gaming visions, from sequels to offering games that were hard to come by. These two systems were partners in bringing incredible games to those who look to play. And in one remarkable moment, they unlocked an entire game series, one that's held with the highest regard. These two consoles are Legend of Zelda machines.